Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altmann, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Colin Clark, Senior Lecturer in Sociology at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. Professor Clark is a specialist on contemporary social divisions and issues of identity, citizenship, disadvantage, and multiculturalism. He has focused much of his work on theories of racial identities, the sociological understanding of ethnic minority communities known as Romanis, Gypsies, and Travelers, and the policy implications surrounding issues of race, ethnicity, asylum, and migration. Recently, he has developed an interest in what has been termed the happiness industry, which is concerned with issues of health and well-being. During fall term, Colin Clark was a visiting professor at the University of Washington. On December 5th, as a guest of the UO Department of Anthropology, he gave a lecture entitled Defining Ethnicity in Cultural and Socio-Legal Contexts, The Case of Scottish Gypsy-Travelers. Colin, welcome, and thank you for coming to talk to us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to jump right into the heart of the subject matter and ask you, when gypsies, I think we're mostly aware, most of us are aware of gypsy culture in Europe, but when did gypsies become a presence in the British Isles? Well,
as you might expect, there's lots of different theories and arguments about something like that. What we can say for certain, based on written archival information, is that Egyptians were first written about in Scotland from 1505. There's historical evidence to verify that. And this, the miscategorization of gypsies as, I mean, that's where gypsy comes from, Egyptian.
That's where the name gypsy comes from.
Exactly, exactly, which is a historical error that remains to this day, because now, thanks to largely linguistic evidence, but also some genetic work that's been done as well on blood types, we can pretty much say for certain that Romanis come from northwest India, and there was a diaspora. Again, there's various reasons about where, why and how this diaspora occurred, from anywhere between the 10th and 13th century out of northwest India. So in Scotland, though, we can say for certain 1505. It was slightly later in England. Now that was migration into the UK, but there's also groups within the UK who are indigenous to the UK. So, for example, there's Irish travellers, Scottish Gypsy-Travellers, English Romanis, Romanichals in Anglo-Romani, and also Welsh Calais gypsies as well. So there's a combination of groups who exist and who have, a thriving culture to this day, who can trace their roots back many generations. So there's been a history for many centuries now.
Does each of those terms that you use represent a distinct and identifiable group, or is there some overlap in those names?
There is overlap. I mean, I think. Like any community or group, people do happen to fall in love with the wrong people. And so therefore there's history of intermarriage and relationships between different groups, and through that there's been a merging of culture, of language, of religion. So I think to talk around clearly defined groups is problematic. I mean, I think we can't really talk about that, and certainly there's also been a history of marriage outside of the community as well, between people who are gypsies and people who are not gypsies, which then leads to interesting questions about how children are raised and through that relationship. But there are, I mean, it's true to say there are certain, maybe minor, definable characteristics. For example, which communities speak Romani and which communities do not speak Romani, the types of religions that are observed, different folklore aspects as well, elements of culture. But the one thing that is true, sadly, is that there's been a history of legislation trying to prevent displays of Gypsy culture, Romani culture. There's been a history of legislation in the UK with regards to the rights of those groups to travel. Because unlike in Central Eastern Europe, where the vast majority of the Roma population are, I mean, that's anywhere between 12 and 15 million people. It's a sizable minority across Central Eastern Europe. In the UK, nomadism is a big part to the present day of Gypsy identity, although legislation has sought to criminalise nomadism. So irrespective of the cultural differences, the law, usually in fairly draconian ways, has basically lumped groups together. And there's been resistance to some of that legislation in different ways. So, yeah.
Let me go back to a couple of things that you mentioned
Sure.
in that answer. I wanted to ask you, first of all, what is that document from 1505 that first makes written mention of the Romani people?
Well, it is in Edinburgh, and it was the Lord High Treasurer's report, and he mentions an encounter with Egyptians, and it was the paying of a tax, I believe. It was a payment of a fee, and he talks about these strange Egyptians who came into the premises in Edinburgh to seek approval to stay and to remain in the city for a period of time. And this was not uncommon of that time. I mean, other documents can be traced within Western Europe, and which illustrates the really kind of first encounters that Western Europeans had with dark-skinned travellers who were strangers and who came in to often to seek sanctuary, to seek employment, to seek accommodation and shelter. So that's what the 1505 memo was. It was the Lord High Treasurer. Yeah.
These things often happen as some kind of a financial transaction
Indeed.
or document, don't they?
Yes, that's it.
Another big question I wanted to ask you to expand on a little bit is the Romani language. Could you explain, I believe it's a derivative of Sanskrit, is that correct?
Indeed, yeah, that's very true. It's a fusion of different kind of languages, largely Hindu and Sanskrit. Although I think I'm not a sociolinguistic person, unfortunately, but I think what we can say is that the language has evolved over many years now, and indeed it's through tracing the language that we're able to, more or less kind of be certain that there was this movement out of India, and the way that's been able to trick people like Yaron Matras, Ian Hancock, who teaches at Austin, Texas, have been able to look at both where groups of Romanis have travelled to and length of time they have stayed, based on what they call loan words, the number of loan words that have filtered into the Romani language. So, for example, in Scotland, where I am, there's at least 3 or 4 different dialects of Romani that we can trace and talk about, and that's largely based on geographical region. So, up in the Highlands, past Inverness, you have a version of what's called Cant. There's a version of Cant that includes some Romani, some English, and some Gaelic. And then in the borders of Scotland, you have a version of Romani that's much more closer to English Romani. So again, there's a higher concentration, if you like, of kind of Sanskrit, Hindi, based sort of composition. So, and then again in England, that's illustrated throughout England and Wales and Ireland as well, although Irish travellers have a very kind of unique language that's what's called various names, Gammon, Shelta, that again is kind of Irish Gaelic in origin, but then has been mixed with different Romani words as well. So it's a language that has evolved and adapted to the circumstances, and I mean, I think that's why it's one reason why Romani culture has existed and thrived despite years of persecution and harassment, because the language is so fundamental to people's identity and to retain that, even though in many Central and Eastern European countries, not just under communism, it was outlawed. People could not publicly converse in Romani. So I think it's a good illustration of just how a culture has survived, how a people has survived and adapted to find, you know, loopholes to kind of raise their children and to speak the language and to practice the customs and traditions that their parents and grandparents have done.
So it's primarily an oral language. I'm asking, I suppose, are there written forms of Romani, or are there grammars or rules of Romani, or is this mostly just in the oral version?
No, I mean, I'm very glad to say, I mean, this is, I think, to my mind, at the moment, the most fascinating aspect of the language. I mean, it has, you're right, I mean, it was for many years an oral tradition. It was not written down. However, that started to change. You now have Romani dictionaries, Romani encyclopedias in different dialects. But the fascinating thing that's going on at the minute is with the birth of the internet, you now have kind of chat rooms where young Roma kids are talking to each other through the internet, and they're trying obviously to be mutually understandable. And I think it's through, you know, literally it's happening through internet chat rooms. Kids are coming together and, you know, with false starts here and there, they're beginning to form a common dialect.
A koine, if you will,
exactly,
of Romani.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you know, and that is, I mean, I say it's not my particular area of research interest, but I've found it a fascinating process. And also, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the Eric Hill books, Spot the Dog, which is a very famous children's...
Tell me, please.
It's a very famous children's book in the UK and in Western Europe.
Oh, are they picture books for very young children?
Yes, they are.
Yes, I do know. Mm-hmm.
Well, Spot the Dog has now been translated into Romani. And so you're seeing this gradual mainstreaming, if you like, of the Romani language, which at one point was a secret language. It was not written down for very express reasons. And I mean, this has caused consternation and debate amongst Romani intellectuals and activists who would maybe prefer the language to still be relatively hidden and used only with you know, natural speakers of Romani. But you know, the cat is out the bag. You know, it's in the internet. It's being published. Poetry is being published in Romani, and it's a beautiful language to hear and to experience. So that's the kind of current state of play. It's all happening on the internet.
Do you speak any version of it? Do you speak Cant or other
I do,
Scottish
yeah.
versions?
I speak Cant, which is the more Gaelic version of it, and I've also picked up through working with people like Donald Kenrick and Thomas Acton and Vladimir Kalinin versions of Romani. So I can get about in Central and Eastern Europe, but as I say, you know, it's not. There are many Roma people who do not speak the language because, again, through largely the communist era, it was very much underground and hidden. But most of my fieldwork is in the UK, although I've done some work in the Czech Republic and Hungary as well. But it's one of those weird things, you know. You tend to find people actually want to speak to you in English because they want to practice their English, because it is the, for better or worse, you know, the universal language, I guess. So. You know, it's a very interesting language.
I wanted to go back to another group identified as the Scottish Highland Travellers, also a nomadic lifestyle, I believe, for that people.
Yeah.
How did that group of Scots become associated with the Roma population?
Okay, I mean that. I mean, there's a direct connection here, I guess, with Irish travellers, whereas you saw the. You know, the sort of the arrival of Irish travellers into mainland UK through incidents and episodes through like the potato famine, which explains a lot of Irish migration, not just Irish traveller migration. You also had the Highland clearances in Scotland, where it was, you know, estimated that well, essentially it was more cost effective for people to have sheep on their land than it was to have people. and this caused a huge kind of internal displacement of people, and that saw a lot of people taking to the road because they had no other option. They had no land, and this is where you start to see the connections taking place. And I talked earlier about intermarriage and relationships forming, and that's again another argument that many Scottish travellers will say, that's my roots. My roots come out of being forced. My parents being forced out and taken to the land. Whereas others will claim that their roots, their history, could be traced back to Central and Eastern Europe, to India. Other groups will talk about the connections with Scandinavia, because there's a lot of connections, because the distance is very short between the UK and Scandinavia, so there's connections there as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a specificness there because of the language, really, and the mixing of Gaelic with kind of Romani, and again, there's a particularity to that group as well. But to talk of really distinctions there, I think is not. It can put you into a kind of false cul-de-sac in a way, because it doesn't really matter who you are, because the legislation will still impact on you the same way. And there's been another group called New Age Travellers who have come on, well, from the late 60s, who started living in buses and caravans and travelling to different festivals. I think in America it's kind of like the Grateful Dead, isn't it? So in the UK it was different. It was like the Isle of Wight Festival and Stonehenge Free Festival, and this is a group of largely young people, multi-ethnic, from middle class kind of backgrounds, who decided to essentially reject mainstream society and make a living and make a family. Living on the road and attending different festivals, and that's a group that still is very much around. And again, I think it's fascinating talking and working with New Age travellers, because this is a group that's relatively recent. It does not have a 15th century origin, but you're now talking with kids who are like second, third generation, and it leads you to a very interesting question: when does a group become an ethnic minority group? What legal status should that group have legal protection as a minority, and how many generations does it take to get you into that situation? So
that's one of your big points of research, isn't it? How do you define a particular ethnic group? At what point can you call it something that has its own identity?
I mean, that's what my talk in Eugene, has been about. It's a legal matter. I mean, there's a strict criteria in the UK for how a group can become a legally recognised ethnic minority group.
What are those criteria? I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, it goes back to a fascinating case in 1983 in England, and it's in the statutes as Mandla versus Dowell-Lee. And what this was, it was a young Sikh child who was refused admission to a Birmingham school, a school in Birmingham in the UK, because of his dress and specifically his turban. And the headmaster would not let this child into the school. His father, who was a lawyer, which helped, took the case to court, and in the appeal case, Lord Fraser of Carmiley he basically gave a list of the different elements. And that included things like a long shared history, common origin, language, religion, various conditions like this. So that really set the legal precedent, and it's that case that has been referred so far to English gypsies and Irish travellers. Those cases were in 1989 and 2000, respectively. So English gypsies have legal protection under the Race Relations Act, as do Irish travellers. And literally 2 months ago, Scottish travellers now have that legal protection. And I was involved in that case. I gave expert witness in the court under oath, which was quite scary, and had to prepare a document basically going through the Mandela criteria and applying it to Scottish Gypsy Travellers. And unfortunately, Judge Nicol Hosey, decided in the claimant's favour. A guy called Ken McLennan, very brave Scottish traveller called Ken McLennan, took the case forward, and we won, which was a fantastic legal victory. And it means now that it doesn't stop racist discrimination, of course, but what it means now is that the community has the means to basically not have to put up with that. So if they are refused service in a shop, they can now, take that shopkeeper to court, or a publican in a bar. They now have the legal means to address racial injustice, which is a very significant step forward. And
do they welcome your participation as an advocate?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's been. I mean, I've never done anything that I've not been asked to. I mean, I think there's an important point there about your place as an academic, and the skills, the expertise that you have. But I was asked to become involved in that case by the now defunct Commission for Racial Equality. They paid for the academic work that I did to prepare that case. But then subsequently, I've been asked to do this work, and I've been very honoured to be able to do that. I mean, it's nice to be part of legal history. But I certainly was not alone. There was other witnesses involved in that. Professor Judith Oakley, who was my PhD supervisor at Edinburgh, and also a brother and sister, Seamus and Rosanna McPhee, who live in Perthshire. They're Scottish Gypsy Travellers, who have done an inordinate amount of work to try and bring justice to the wider community. And I think they really, along with Ken, stand out in that regard.
I know that the legal definitions of ethnicity and legal protections are part of your main concern, but I was struck by the list of co-sponsors for your talk here at Oregon, because it gives an idea of the wide-reaching implications of the policy issues involved. So
yes,
your talk
yes.
is sponsored primarily, you're the guest of the Department of Anthropology, but it's sponsored by our Humanities Center, by the Wayne Moore Center for Law and Politics, by the Department of Ethnic Studies, by the Department of Sociology. Clearly, this is an issue that has very wide ramifications in all sorts of ways.
I think it does, and I mean, I was very honoured to be here and to be sponsored by the list of bodies that you mentioned there, and I think it is. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that interdisciplinarity is spoken about in very glowing terms. It's something that I think we all acknowledge and we all want to be a part of. It's just unfortunate that funding bodies and research councils are usually less reluctant to, in name they advocate and talk about interdisciplinarity, but when it comes to the hard realities of getting funding, interdisciplinarity can be still quite hard to pull off, I find. But the academic ideas are very much there. I mean, I come from a department that's part cultural geography, part sociology. I was trained as an anthropologist in my PhD. My undergraduate degree was in political science. I don't really know what I am. I mean, I'm called a senior lecturer in sociology, but I mean, I see what I do as public scholarship, as engaging within the academic community, but also, it's essential to me, as blood flows through you, that to be engaged with the real world and to try and do all you can and use the skills you have to address injustice and inequality where it occurs. And I was just very lucky that in this particular legal case, I was able to employ those skills.
It's a great example of the public engagement of the intellectual. I think it's you really are bringing about difference. We only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to ask you if you would switch topics with me just for a minute or two. I have to ask you about the happiness industry. Could
Sure.
you explain what the happiness industry is in brief terms?
In brief terms, yeah. Well, that work came about through a combination of, well, serendipitous factors. I kind of stumbled into it.
Happy factors, perhaps?
Yeah, partly that. And also, I think it has come on in Scotland. I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about the need for Scotland to be more confident, to be more outgoing, to be more entrepreneurial. I mean, it's part of the neoliberal project, basically, to try and shake off the myth, which I don't agree with anyway, that all Scots are dour and miserable, largely because of the weather, but other factors as well. And a lot of government money has gone into this idea of promoting confidence and well-being. And I really wanted to take issue with some of that because, well, for two main reasons. A, all Scots are not dour. They're not all miserable. Some of us are very happy. And we're also, I think, an entrepreneurial nation. When you look at the list of things that have come out of Scotland, famous philosophers, scientists, novelists, I mean, poets. There's been a lot of creativity and a lot of entrepreneurialism that has come out of Scotland. And the other factor was that driving the happiness industry has been this false idea, it seems to me, that you can buy yourself happiness. I mean, I think, Spike Milligan put it best when he said, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it buys you a better form of being miserable, because more money tends to lead to more problems. I think I might have misquoted him there, but anyway.
A more comfortable form of being
That's
miserable,
it. Yeah,
more or less.
exactly. Yeah, I got it wrong. I knew I'd get that wrong. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff I've been trying to challenge. You can't buy happiness through consumption. You can read all the books on happiness. You can take pills. You can go to therapy. But I think happiness comes from something else.
Can you say in one sentence what you deem necessary for a happy life?
Pets. All the research evidence points to pets being a source of great happiness. Also, being in your mid-30s to mid-40s is when you're most likely to be miserable. Happiness is U-shaped, apparently.
So if we survive the dip, we'll
If you
come
survive
back
the
out
dip in your mid-30s to mid-40s, then you'll be okay.
On that note, I'm going to have to stop you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. It was a real pleasure.
Much. Thank you.
Our guest today is Colin Clark, a sociologist from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. Thank you for watching.